What's going on, everybody? Feder here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, we are going to be finalizing all of the scores and all the machines that we went over in the Direct Drive Battle Season 2. I sat down, I went through each machine, I thought long and hard about every single category that I made in this roundup. And what we do is basically we go through and add up all of the scores, we figure out which one of these machines gave us the biggest score, had the most on its list, and then more importantly, we take that number and we associate it with the price of the machine to get another score, the cost to performance score. And I think that that is really important because not all of the time can you afford the machine that has the biggest spec list. So just because something on paper has everything, all the bells and whistles, doesn't necessarily mean that when you look at its price and what you're getting for that price, means that that machine is right for you. Sometimes something that can come under the radar, priced correctly, can really be the absolute winner in the category. And I gotta say, there's a lot of surprises in this particular video with the machines that we took a look at in Season 2. So this is going to be somewhat a longer video because I do want to go over every single category in this list. So definitely use the timestamps to get you through this video. And if you're looking for specifically a machine or a specific category, or you just want to jump ahead, go ahead and use those to your advantage. So let me get on my laptop and let me pull up the screen so I can go over all these categories and we can see what these machines were all about. All right, let's go. Alright, so let me kind of go over each category here and we'll introduce each section as we go. And let's check out the machines. So we have 7 on this particular list, and this is actually 6 machines that I've had, except one of them was modified. And I'll explain in a second as we go. So let's just go from the top. So we have the Kaiwu 3D Tycoon Max, which is the same thing as the Tycoon, except it's just larger, not in height, but just width. We have the Artillery Sidewinder X2. This has definitely been making some ripples in the 3D printing world as just a decent deal for what you're getting. The Crux X1 by TronXY, small little machine with that's priced really competitively, and I'll go over the price in just a second. The Sovol SV01 Pro, which is Sovol's take on an Ender 3 S1, and actually uses actual Ender components. So it's a little bit more of than a clone. It's kind of like a stepbrother, I guess, or stepsister, a step sibling, if you will, to the Ender 3 S1, and it's priced accordingly. Then we have the another little smaller machine, the Kingroon KP3S Pro. And this is what I was talking about here. The one underneath of it, the Pro S1 with PI plate. This has all of the modifications that you can purchase from Kingroon, except I noticed that you can buy the machine that's labeled the S1 that has those upgrades. So my experience is I had the Pro, I did some testing on it, then I added the modifications to it, which made it the S1 out of the box as if you bought it, and then it has the price there as if you bought it that way, and then I did tests on it that way. So it ended up being 2 machines, but in my personal experience it was 1, but you can buy it separate, and I thought it would be important to have that designation here, and I'll go over as we get into it here. And then finally, the Voxelab Aquila D1. I haven't heard much about this machine, but it has easily become one of my most used machines, and I'll go over exactly why. So the next category next to the machine name here is price, and there's a couple things that you might see here. Is there's some colors in the background. There is a red background to the worst in the category, and then there's a green background to the best in the category. So in the price category, the worst is going to be the highest price, and the green is going to go for the lowest price. So the highest price machine is the Tycoon Max at $600, and then the lowest price is the Crux X1 with $190. So one thing I want to definitely make sure to note is these are the prices that I put here when I was making this list, when I was grading these machines. I did notice that some of these machines go lower, some they go higher. I looked them up, made sure that the prices were correct, whether it was Amazon or their official websites, when I was making this list. As an example, the Tycoon Max had a more than 50% off sale at some point and was on, was going way less than $300. So you got to keep that in of mind. It kind of changes the whole grading thing that we have going on here based on the price. So if you're interested in any of these machines, definitely check out the price at the time. And I'm obviously going to have links to all these machines down below. And if you're interested in seeing any of my videos on all these machines, there's a playlist for the direct drive battle, which you can check out. All of them are there. Some have multiple videos, some have single videos. So let's just jump right in and go into the first category, which is assembly. How did the assembly go? And the way we're going to grade these, there's a score between 1 and 10. In this case, 10 being very easy and 1 being very hard. So this was a very easy category to grade, especially compared to Season 1 or even before Season 1 when I was just doing machines without having any kind of battle going on, is all of these machines are extremely easy to put together, which makes them really easy to recommend for beginners or people that don't want a kit as a printer. The cool thing about these machines is the only thing that can make them easier to assemble is if, well, they came completely standing in a box, or they were a microwave style printer where they're already fully enclosed with nothing to put together. So the hardest thing you have to do on some of these machines is put in a few bolts from the bottom, 4 or 5 bolts, in some cases 6, 7, 8 bolts. Very easy stuff with very basic tools. Anyone can put these machines together. They're not perfect 10s because, like I said, you do have to still assemble 2 pieces together and maybe connect a couple connectors. Outside of that, in my personal opinion, this is super easy. And if you're buying a 3D printer, the least thing that you're going to have to do is just put together a few parts to assemble this machine. Very easy to do, in my personal opinion. All right, next category is the ease of use. So here we have some standouts. We have an obvious lowest score with a 5, being the Kaiwu 3D Tycoon Max, and in my personal opinion, it has a learning curve to it. Not only is the construction a little bit different, but also the firmware is very different than other machines. It is more of a what you see is what you get type of thing, where you click the icon and that icon isn't the menu, it's actually the actual setting for the printer. You get used to it, but it definitely gets a 5 as not a 1, not a 2, not a 3, not a 4, but a 5. So an average kind of score, but it is the lowest in the category. So that's why it gets that red background. Whereas the easiest machines to operate, in my opinion at least, is the Kingroon KP3S Pro and the Pro S1, being a really similar machine except with some upgrades. And then the next closest one was the Sovol SV01. They have a very friendly screen, very friendly firmware. It's colorful, it's bright, it's easy to use. So those get the top of the category, and the Tycoon being the lowest. And all these colors I will also make sure I explain towards the end here. So 2 of these categories, pretty self-explanatory. There's a notes directly above each score, so you kind of get a better idea of why I put those there. Let's keep moving. Then we're going to get into build quality. So this actually has a 4-way tie with the Tycoon Max, the Crux X1, the KP3S Pro S1, and then the Voxelab D1, all of them having a 9 at a very high build quality. I actually think that the D1, the Aquila D1, is almost a 10. There's the only thing that's really holding it back is the wire management on it is not loose. It's actually really tidy, but it hangs off the side a little bit more than I'd like. If it kind of like went towards the back in some way, maybe through some kind of guide, maybe there's some printable thing out there, I think that would be a 10 and definitely edge out the rest. I think the next closest one in here is the Tycoon Max, having its construction the way that it's kind of like boxed in, everything is inside and very nicely done. So definitely some good scores there. The lowest being the artillery Sidewinder, and that's because the build plate is glued onto the machine itself, which makes it really easy to assemble. You don't have to assemble that part at all or kind of care about it until something goes wrong, but when it goes wrong, that might be somewhat interesting for you. So it gets a 6 because I do still think it's really good, like really good. 6 is still great, but it's not the best in the category, that's for sure. Let's move on. All right, printable materials. So this category talks about or kind of grades what you can print, at least out of the box, with these machines, and I'll go over what I mean by that. So there's some numbers listed above each of the grade itself, and that gives the highest temperature that the manufacturer at least states somewhere in their marketing that the machine can go. And 300 would technically be the highest, except you see there's 2 300s. There's the Voxelab Aquila D1, which got the highest score of a 10, And then you see a 300 on the Tycoon Max, which only gets an 8. Why is that? Well, because the Tycoon Max does not come with an all-metal hot end. So it gets an 8 because it's amazing to not have to worry about changing firmware when you want to print high, but it's limited with the PTFE-lined heat break that's on there. So it gets a lower score of an 8 there. Whereas the D1, for example, it's the only machine in the category that has an all-metal hot end that can go to a full 300C, and that makes that machine an absolute 10. Now, the lowest is an interesting story as well, because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. The Sidewinder X2 has a limit, the software limit of 240, which is fairly low, which means you're not going to be printing a bunch of ABS or nylons and that kind of thing. You're just a little bit too low of a temperature. However, they did that because it doesn't have an all-metal hot end, and they kept it safe. So yes, it is the lowest score in this category with an average score of 5. However, I didn't go lower because technically this should be lower. I didn't go lower out of respect for them to cap it as software to make it safe for everyone to use. Whereas the Kaiwu 3D, it's not that it's reckless. They're giving you more of what you want. They expect you to kind of like know the limits of these machines, interestingly enough. But if you didn't do your research and you just saw, oh, it goes to max, I'm just going to print high, well, you're going to be damaging your PTFE tube, and those PTFE tubes, as you guys all I'm sure know, when they get hot, they off-gas, and they could be somewhat dangerous if you print it at that temperature for a long time. They start to degrade and off-gas. So that's beside the point. Now we're getting into kind of like technicals. However, in this particular category, the top temperatures are 300. Some do it better. The Aquila doing it best. And the lowest 240, which means you can still print your TPUs, your PLAs, your PETG. However, you're going to be limited there by software. So if you wanted to go on the X1, for example, and upgrade to an all-metal hot end, you're going to have to look at some software solution to raise that temperature up. Whereas on the D1 or the Kaiwu Max, you're not going to have to do that. So they get a higher score in this category. All right, let's move on to the next one. Next category is print speed. Now, this is going to be one of those subjects where probably some keyboard scientists are going to be down in the comment section talking about speed. These speeds are relative to the type of machine that it is. Obviously, in the past few months, some of the fastest machines ever have come out. They're kind of changing the game. All manufacturers are scrambling to change everything that they have been doing and working on to try to catch up to these really fast Core XY motion machines. So even though compared to those machines, this might print slow, for what these machines are, for how much they cost, I still think that these are very viable machines in terms of their speed and quality. And this one in particular, this category is going to be categorized and scored based on what these machines are in general. So in looking a little bit deeper here, we have the lowest score with the Sovol S1. In my particular example, the fastest I got out of it to get really good quality prints was around 60. But when I was pushing a little bit higher, I started noticing all kinds of issues and I lowered it down. I do think with some tuning, that machine can definitely go faster. So that's something to look at if you're looking at the SV01, which is still a really good machine. And the highest in this category are the Sidewinder X2 and the S1 version of the KP3S Pro, which both of those machines in my slicer right now are just set at 120, and that's what I print with, and they come out with really good prints. And actually those machines can go a little bit faster with some tuning. My Pro S1 right now has Clipper, and it is and I used accelerometers to tune it in Clipper, and it stays at 120. And the reliability and just the speed of that machine, how fast it moves, it's really fun to watch for what it is. So both of those machines get the best in the category with 8. All right, moving right along. All right, now we move into build area. This is another simple category here that's going to be easy to grade. However, I still think it's important to know and to note here. For example, the TronXY Crux X1 gets a 1 because it is the smallest of the bunch. It is limited by its size at 180, 180, 180. Now, in my findings, that is big enough to print most things that you're going to be printing. However, you are limited. You can't print any bigger. Whereas a machine like the Sidewinder X2, that's 300 by 300 by 400, you're actually not limited by size, and you can print smaller. So that's something to look at. Now there is a 9 on the list, the Tycoon Max. It's a 300 by 300 machine as well. However, it's limited in height by 230 millimeters, so it can't go nearly as high as the Sidewinder. However, you can still print stout and wide prints on that machine. So like I said, categories are easy. The sections in this category are easy here, and I listed the overall numbers of the size of the machine above the grade. So if you're looking at those things, just take a look there. All right, let's keep going. Feature set is the next category. So this is kind of like, if you guys have noticed, if you're looking for printers, there's so many of the same type of printer around nowadays. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the manufacturers try to give you some feature or a feature set that's better than the competition, or it tries to mimic the competition, something along those lines. There's always something that tries to make the printer special or marketable. So that's what these things are. I'm not going to go over each one, but the ones I do go over, you can see that they're labeled above the score of what they are. Like, let me give you an example. The D1 wins this category easily with a 10 because I wrote that it has it all. It has every single thing that you might want out of this type of machine, out of an Ender 3 clone like this. Everything that you might want down to linear rails, this thing has. Now you can still upgrade this machine, but it comes with everything that you want out of the box. So it's kind of interesting that you don't hear much about this machine. Maybe their marketing isn't up to par, or maybe it's something else, and maybe I'll go over that specifically later on in the category. But the lowest we have here is an average score with the Kingroon KP3S Pro. If you take a look at that, it does have linear rails, but its downfall is it doesn't have them on all of the axes, and then it uses just pretty standard parts, and just the feature set isn't as strong. It's not bare bones. It has some fun stuff, but it doesn't have, for example, it doesn't have auto bed leveling, things of that nature, so it gets just an average 5. And yes, the Pro S1 does raise it way up to an 8 because those modifications that you add, the print plate, the 2 more rails on the Y, those add so much to that tiny machine that it does make an actual dramatic difference. Now, there is a very close second place here with the Tycoon Max getting a 9, and this has everything except for an all-metal hot end. If this had the inclusion of an all-metal hot end, this would be a better machine in my personal opinion. And the funny thing is you can buy an all-metal hot end, the whole assembly from Kaiwu 3D, right from their website for around $8. So if you're going to be buying this machine from them, I highly suggest you also grab the hot end because the software is already unlimited to 300C, so you can just take it out, put the new one in, and you're good to go. So that almost wins the category with a 9. Let's move on to the next category. All right, so next on the list is the unique feature. So just like the feature set is what the feature set is looking like, what is the one thing that makes this machine special? And that is going to be the things that are listed above the price. Let me go over them for you. So we have a tie actually for the lowest score of a 7, which is still really good. Let me go over those. The Crux X1 has a really unique rail system. It does seem to be proprietary, which some people question about the longevity of. However, in my personal opinion, I think that the Crux X1's motion system, as well as the other TronXY machine that I have, it has the same motion system. Those embedded rails inside of the 2020 extrusions are some of the smoothest moving mechanisms that I have on any of my machines. I think they did a good job with that system, and it just time will tell if other companies will adapt this or TronXY just runs with it. I think that it is a really unique and interesting system for sure. And then the next one is the Sovol SV01. It is a budget E3 S1. It's literally a well, not even a copy. It's kind of like a continuation of an Ender 3 S1, except it has completely different firmware and a different screen. It has a touch screen on it, and the UI is great. I think this is probably one of the best UIs that are designed in 3D printers. Usually they're very boring, they're very stale. This one you can pick through different styles. The buttons are easy to understand, the menus are easy to understand. It's kind of fun, and it doesn't get annoying to use, which is really nice. But still, even with that said, those are features that are still earning these printers a 7. The highest here is the Aquila Aquila D1, which again gets a 10 in this category as well, with maxed out. It just has everything. It has literally everything that you might want. So it doesn't even have one unique feature. It's everything. I guess the most unique feature I could say is it has a Sprite style extruder. They kind of made their own. And it's all metal inside, not only just the heat break, but the actual construction of the extruder itself. There's no plastic there, it's all metal, and it has its own heat sink that's machined. It has fans that flow through the system similarly to a Sprite. It's just really well done in my personal opinion. And if you're looking down right now at the section, the two machines at the very bottom, they don't have any red. All you see is green, which is kind of interesting, with the Aquila D1 having 3 10s on this list already and 2 9s. So once again, interestingly enough, you don't hear much about this machine because there's just other machines that are coming out that I guess are drowning it out because of something else that might be happening. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, then we have the out-of-the-box prints. So this is an important section for me personally because I tried to test these machines in a really similar fashion where I get them out of the box, as you guys know, I put them together, and then I try to print whatever they have on the box, what they have on the SD card straight out of the box, and then I slice some of my own files, usually using the slicer that's in the books of these things. Most of the time it's Cura, 99% of the time it's Cura, and I test it with my own files for about a week or so before I do any kind of evaluation on these machines. So what the out-of-the-box prints were in this case. The Tycoon Max has the lowest score of 5. I'm getting just average, okay prints. They weren't bad. They weren't the best I had. They were just good. And I do think this machine could get better with tuning. I think that's really its biggest downfall, is kind of like the firmware tuning on this machine. The hardware itself is very, very good. So it's kind of like up to you to make it the best it can. But out of the box, it gets a 5, which is the lowest in the category. The two machines on the bottom, yet again, are dominating with a tie for first place with a score of 9, way above average for the Pro S1, and the way above average for the Aquila D1. Both of those machines are just absolutely killer in terms of quality, speed. They're just printing really, really well. The D1 specifically, I've been printing a lot of ABS with, and even though it's not enclosed, everything that I've thrown at it so far is really good. I printed an Afterburner Voron extruder hot end assembly in ABS, and it printed that stuff just absolutely perfect. I printed some functional stuff for a buddy of mine and for a family member, all in ABS. All of it has come out absolutely great. So the D1 and the Kingroon KP3S Pro S1 are definite winners in this category for out-of-the-box prints. All right, then we go to upgradability. This one's going to be easy because some of these machines, the way that they're built, you just can't upgrade them too much. Some of them, the way that they're built, means you can just do endless things. There's actually a 3-way tie and almost a 4-way tie in this category. The Sovol SV01 being mostly an under 3S1 type machine you can do anything with. KP3S Pro, also similarly, as well as the Pro S1. You can do whatever you want to those machines. There's so much aftermarket. The more you search, the more you find, the more you can do. Really fun. So if you're the type of person that likes to modify their machines, those 3 are very easily winning. And the closest one is the Tycoon Max. The only limitation is that its frame, the way that it's built, is somewhat unique to it. Obviously, you can tell that the way that it works, its mechanics, the firmware, all the wiring, all the components it uses are somewhat generic, but the way that it's constructed, the way that it's put together is a little bit unique. But if you're into modifying printers, you can still do whatever you want to it. And the lowest one on this category is a 2 with the TronXY Crux X1, being one of those machines where you kind of get it and you just print and you just use it and it works really well. It doesn't necessarily need modifications, but you couldn't do too much to it. It has unique rails, unique screen, things of that nature, and actually the hot end itself is of an older design, even though it works really well. So you can still buy stuff for it, but especially the replacement parts are available. But as far as modification, it's definitely the lowest on this list. All right, then we're getting into the final category that has a score in it. is reliability. So in the time frame of me using it, how has the reliability went? And with much sadness, the Tycoon Max has been the least reliable because of its firmware. Nothing hardware related. The hardware is actually amazing. Like I said, it was let down by firmware and then by support. When I had the machine and used the machine and needed help with the machine with the firmware, because mine had issues, as you saw in the video that I made, the company never replied back to any method of me reaching out to them. They replied back months later with a firmware for me to try, but I had to pretty much jump through hoops, and it was because, according to some posts and their emails, they were moving buildings. The company was moving buildings. Then one of the salespeople or whoever I was talking to must have left the company. I don't know what the deal was, but it really took a long time for me to get any kind of support, and I definitely felt alone. And now, if it was one of my only machines, or I had several machines, I could have fixed it myself. The fact that it has a nano board means you can install all kinds of different firmware. You can fix this yourself relatively easily. But if you were looking for support, at least at the time when I had it, I didn't get it. And now they respond, they talk to me, they try to help me as much as I can whenever I need. So take that, for what it is. At the time, it get the lowest score here because it wasn't very reliable for me. On another note, the TronXY Crux X1 was an absolute workhorse. You hit print, this thing just keeps going on, and there was a time frame when I was using this thing just absolutely non-stop. It was just sitting there just printing with zero problems whatsoever. So it easily wins the category with a 10, with the only closest machine being the Voxelab D1, which gets a 9. And once again, it's held back just a bit by its firmware because some of the buttons in the firmware are just unclear. It's kind of like a strange mix between what a menu is and what a button is, and if that was clear and there's some indication of numbers, like for example how long the print has to go, that would make it a 10, but it stays there with a 9 for that reason. All right, let's move right along. Alright, so the next two categories here should be self-explanatory, but what they mean is there is the green and red categories, which are the green being the most highest scores in each row, and then the red being the worst scores in each row. So yes, each one of them within themselves can have a winner and a loser. Let me go over it. In the green column there, we have a two-way tie with 6 points each, which means both of the machines at the very bottom, the Pro S1 and the Aquila D1, have 6 of the highest scores in the category. Whereas if you keep going, they also happen to win the next category, which is the worst in the category. They have 0, so they win the worst category with 0 of the worst scores. So both these machines are scoring extremely high out of both of the seasons of the direct drive battle. And then we have the Sovol SV01 having the lowest amount of highest scores with just 1. It still had a 10 in the upgradability section, so still a great outcome, but that is the lowest out of all the other machines. So all the other machines definitely won some sort of thing in the category. They're better at some things than other machines. Then in the worst one, the one that got the most lowest scores, is the TronXY Crux X1. So what we do is we take all of those numbers in the blue sections over here, and we put them together to get a score, and this is what we got. So technically, the winner of the score itself is almost a two-way tie. The Voxelab Aquila D1 has the highest score of 90, and that is a significantly higher score than any of the machines in Season 1. These are not only produced better, they perform better, they have way more, and I think that is happening in the industry as machines are getting faster and better, and just better engineered and come all assembled. Machines are getting better for lower prices, and I think that's really important. And in this case, the Kingroon KP3S Pro S1 gets an 89, and the Voxelab Aquila gets a D1. Both are outstanding machines, linear motion, everything that you might want to throw at. They're not limited by much at all whatsoever. You can do pretty much anything, and if you're into the hobby of 3D printing, those are really good, with I think the D1 edging everyone out because you can also just use that thing out of the box and never mod it because it has everything you want. So very interesting. That's the winner of the total score for Season 2. And the lowest, which is still a super respectable 72, is the Crux 1. I think the highest score in last season, let's take a look, was 78. It was a two-way tie. The highest score was a 78. So this is 72 for this season, a little bit lower than the winners of last season, 72. So that's just interesting to kind of just wrap your mind around. So even though it got low scores in some categories, it still got really high scores in some other ones, which gives it a score of 72. And now let's go for the final category here, which is going to be the cost to performance ratio, and this ratio is calculated based on the prices. Now we have a very clear winner and a very clear loser. The lowest cost to performance by far is the Tycoon Max. Now the performance is actually really good with at 80, just the score in general. But when you add in the cost to the mix, it gets a very low 1.3. Whereas the winner of the entire thing is the KP3S Pro. That's the easiest machine for me to recommend. It's actually my current favorite machine of almost all time. I just really love the way that the machine is. It's a very easy one to tabletop next to you. It doesn't take up much space at all. You can modify it. You can do whatever you want. You can print any material with just a slight modification. It's just very, very well done. And the most importantly, it's priced so competitively well that it very easily dominates this category with a 3.9. Now, there is a close one, which is interestingly enough the TronXY X1, the Crux 1 by TronXY with a 3.79, which is basically a 3.8. It's very, very close. So even though it got the lowest score, they price this machine accordingly. It's priced at $190, and sometimes you can even get it cheaper on sale, which means the cost to performance ratio of the TronXY Crux 1 is unbelievable. And the fact that it comes with a PEI sheet means just that its day-to-day use is so well done, and you don't feel ashamed that you spend a ton of money on it. It's literally $190, which is a fraction of the cost on some of the most popular machines that are coming out right now that I'm sure you hear about all the time. So very, very notable there. And then let's talk about the worst case scenario. It is actually a really great machine that's kind of held back by firmware, but it's also held back by the price. So it's kind of interesting. It's almost like the company itself is kind of shooting themselves in the toe with this machine. Now, I do want to note that just a short few months ago from this video, or a month ago from this video, they had a crazy sale where this machine was under $200. Which is just incredible. And even if you say they have a 50% off sale, which is kind of nuts just to say, if we change that price to $300 from $600, we're getting a score of 2.67, which is extremely competitive in this entire thing. In fact, if you look at Season 1, the highest score was a score of 2.3 in the season, the Focus Odin F3. So this would get a higher score of 2.6 at the price range of $300. But as it stands, it is $600, at least when I was making this video, which loses the entire battle with a 1.3. So kind of sad. It's hard to recommend that machine at that price. I would never actually buy that machine personally for that price. $600 is almost P1P money, and that machine is not a P1P. You might have your opinions about the P1P, but it is what it is in terms of what you're getting for the price. It's been an absolute game changer, and this one being way too close at $600 is just not worth it. However, if it goes on sale again and it's somewhere, even if it's $300 and under, it's way easier to recommend for what it is. All right, so I think that's all. Take a look at these scores. Judge them for yourselves. This is just in general my personal opinion. However, now I've had 39 machines come through here. I'm not counting in that number any doubles. Like I've had so many Aquila, standard Aquilas. I've had like 5 or 6 of those just in general. So I'm not counting those into the mix. I'm talking about just different machines. I try to test them all in a very similar way so that I can just grow in terms of knowledge of how these things function and work, and see what companies are doing and bring that knowledge to you guys through videos like this. So there you go. If someone was to come up to me right now and say, hey, what machine should I get at the moment? I would say take a look at the Kingroon KP3S Pro and the Pro S1, because those are really nice machines. And if you are on a budget at all, if you're looking for under $200 machine just to start out, the Crux one seems to be just a really good deal if you can get away with printing small. And actually, just worth noting that the Kingroon KP3S is only 200 by 200, so it is smaller than the standard 230, 225 machine. So if you need something bigger, you can take a look at this list, kind of go over the sections and tailor what you're looking for, and at least compare these things amongst each other. And I think, and hopefully that was very useful to you, as it was for me to have for myself. Alright guys, I think that's all for me today, and definitely be sure to check out at least these two videos that are coming up right over here, because I think you'll find them entertaining. And as always, I'll see you all in the comments. Later.